Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Intuitive Eating Tips with Taylor. For those of you that don't already know me, my name is Taylor. I'm a non-diet registered dietitian, and I help women learn how to personalize their nutrition habits in a stress-free way so they don't have to feel out of control around food anymore, and they can learn how to feel their best in their body while creating those personalized and stress-free eating habits. And on today's edition of Intuitive Eating Tips with Taylor, I'm going to talk all about how you can set boundaries with diet culture. And to start off, I want to talk about why setting these boundaries is important. Because we all know that when we join or when we start learning about intuitive eating and we turn away from diet culture, as we all know, that tends to not make sense to a lot of people in our life because diets are so prevalent and so well known in our society and known as the healthy thing to do. And so when we turn away from them, it often looks like we are the ones that are doing the things that aren't great for our health, when in reality, we're actually taking care of our health so much more than people realize and way more than we ever were when we were dieting. And so, and again, to set boundaries because we may have people in our life who still bring up diet culture things like talking about their weight or talking about the food they're eating, whether it be good or bad, or whatever else it may be that maybe someone in your life brings up that just triggers that old diet culture feeling for you. That may be where you want to set some more boundaries. And I want to give you some tips too, again, how to do that in the first place. And again, setting boundaries is your way of protecting your needs and your peace. And so that's really why we want to do it, because we want to make sure that we can protect our own peace so we can continue to move forward in this process. But keep in mind, your inner needs and your boundaries are not going to be the same as another person's or that person that you might need to set the boundary with. Keep that in mind because when setting boundaries, of course, we want to, like I said, protect our peace, but we want to keep in mind that the person we're talking to is going to have a different perspective than us. And that's important to know as I continue talking about the tips to help you set boundaries with diet culture. So getting into some more tips on how to go about setting boundaries with someone who you may need to set boundaries with when it comes to this kind of topic. Going into it, I would first and foremost just say, make sure you ask permission to do so first. So even whether you're going about it through text message or phone call or face to face, giving that or getting that permission can be vital because it can really make or break setting the boundaries. So what I mean by saying ask for permission, literally ask, like literally say, hey, I have something I want to talk to you about. Is this a good time? You don't have to say, hey, I want to set a boundary with you, because that's probably going to sound weird. But again, you can say, I have something that's been on my mind. I really would like to talk to you. Is this a good time? If it's a good time for them, then we can go on to the next step. If it's not a good time for them, hopefully they can say, you know what, this really isn't a good time to talk right now. I'd probably have a little bit more headspace and chance to talk a little bit more about this, at a later date. And so that way, okay, they're not ready to hear what you have to say yet. And so it's not the time to set the boundary. And you can bring it up again, or you can say, hey, when would be a good time to talk about it, or whatever it may be, however it works with that person. It doesn't have to be like a scheduled thing, but again, just knowing you want to bring it up again and again, making sure you ask for permission. And then when you are have the ability to sit down and have the conversation with them and set that boundary, make sure when you are talking about it, make sure you use statements like I feel or I, noticed. And again, this goes back to that person that you're talking to doesn't have the same needs or boundaries as you do. And so when you're separating your feelings from theirs, you can separate, again, your needs and your boundaries. And so they have a better understanding of where you're coming from, but without feeling like you're pushing your beliefs onto them. And I hope that makes sense. But again, so using I feel statements to get your point across and then allowing them to kind of use the same. Again, because our realities are different and we want to hear each side out. And then as you are setting your boundary, it is important to say what you're saying with love and respect. I want you to think about this from a different point of view, as if someone was setting a boundary with you. So if someone was trying to set a boundary with you and all they were was attacking you or just coming at you in any negative way outside of love and respect, you're not going to accept whatever boundary they're setting. You're just not. It's not going to feel good, and you're not going to want to listen to what they have to say. So it's not that you have to tiptoe around people, but again, just going into the conversation with love and respect, knowing that communicating in that way is likely going to get you the boundary. It's going to get you the boundary to be set. That is important. And that's why we want to, again, not tiptoe, but just use love and respect when we're talking to that person. And then if you have a hard time setting boundaries for yourself, which I've found for myself too, one other tip I can give you is imagine you're setting the boundary for your child or your inner child if you do not have your own child. Because I found that it is a lot easier to set boundaries for, again, your child because you have unconditional love for them. But if you're setting your boundary for your inner child, again, you can have a little bit more unconditional love for that because it's not necessarily the person you are now, it's someone else. And again, in your mind, you're setting that boundary for someone else technically, but in reality, you're still setting the boundary for yourself. And that, again, just going towards that inner child mentality or for your child can help you just set the boundary in the first place. Okay, so a couple last minute tips before I wrap up. Make sure when you do set the boundary and you're finishing up the conversation, just give a little confirmation with them. Just say, hey, appreciate you. Also say thank you. Like, I appreciate you sitting down and talking about this. Is it okay, or are you going to be able to respect X, Y, and Z? And getting that little confirmation can not only confirm that they are yes or no going to respect that boundary, but again, it's just confirmation. It's if in the future, if they're not respecting that boundary, you can say, hey, we already talked about this and you said that you would be okay with, respecting that, and you're not doing it now. What happened? And so again, you're just getting that confirmation. It's almost like a paper trail in a way, to say, yeah, you said you do this, but you're not, kind of thing. And hopefully they do, and hopefully they respect your boundary. But again, making sure you get that confirmation. And one last thing, if they do not respect your boundary, you can really go about this in any way, depending on who the person is and in your relationship with them. But if they don't respect it, you can, have another conversation with them if you'd like. And again, just say, hey, we've already talked about this, if you can't, learn to respect this, I'm probably going to have to distance myself a little bit from you, or, our relationship isn't going to be able to be as great as I'd like it to. And that's just a matter of fact, because it is going to impact you if they can't respect your boundary, and it is going to impact your relationship. And so again, you can decide to have another conversation if they're not respecting your boundary, or if they, if they're not someone that you are super close with, or you don't, maybe have already had these conversations with over and over again, then it might just be time to distance yourself and get a little space from them, not talk to them as much. And if they ask why, you can tell them like, hey, we've had this conversation before. We've talked about it multiple times. You're not respecting my boundary, and it's impacting, my mental health and our relationship. And so I'm just having to distance myself from you. And then again, you can move on from there as to whether you continue to have that person in your life or you work on it. So there are your tips for setting boundaries with diet culture. Again, those are all the tips I want to give you to just set the boundary in the first place. If you have any questions, if you have any comments or ideas that you want to throw in there, please comment, let me know. I'd love to get more ideas from you. This is what I found has worked for me and my relationship the best. So I wanted to share that with you. And again, just give us any of your feedback and look out for the next intuitive eating tip with Taylor soon.